the class today, we're going to talk about how to not avoid conflict. And I know sometimes when you have two negatives, like not avoid, people get confused, but it's actually a very effective way sometimes to talk about very difficult things. We try to label and put words to certain things. And sometimes the best way to explain something is just the not of something bad, right? So the not avoiding conflict, because avoiding conflict is so easy to do. Mm-hmm. That's the topic. And I know we've had some leadership groups asking their direct reports to say, I want you to listen to this talk. So I hope it will meet, if not exceed, those expectations. But we were here till pretty late putting this together. So you're going to see, once again, straight off the press, sort of handwriting included, but let me jump right into it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
We're going to try to leave more time for Q&A, but like we said before, if you're new, the Military SEALIFT Command team from you guys can just jump right into the chat, be aggressive in the chat. I'll try to answer. We'll try to sort of get to questions as we go, but we'll also leave time at the end. Okay?
So I'm giving you a bird's eye view really quick. The presentation goes to slide 17. It's broken into two parts where the dark slides are, but I'm going to go right into this thing and probably such an important topic. And I think a lot of us don't even recognize how ritualized or habitualized we are to actually avoid conflict. Mm-hmm. You know, the reaction of this woman in the picture, this is our default to most conflict. We call it drama. We call it, just a waste of energy. We might even pride ourselves in like not going into conflict, mm-hmm. right? And you see other people doing it and you kind of like, look at them, turn up your nose. It's sort of like, oh, I don't do that. I don't ever want to be that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to walk you through maybe a contrarian point of view. Hopefully it will be more than a contrarian point of view, that you might be living in the wrong century. The last 100 years in the industrial age, that was the exact right strategy, no longer in this century. So going back to what I think is one of the most important things, the OODA loop. The military coined this term. To be honest, very few really understand how to understand this notion of building a faster or tighter OODA loop, which is another fancy word for decision-making framework. The first OOD stands for observe, orient, and decide. And as odd as it is, decide is not a decision. Decide is sharing your intention of what you're going to do. It's not an actual decision until the A, which is when you action. And so the best way to think of OODA loop is two parts. One is the sense making before you actually go make the call. And the faster OODA loop means people can make, hundreds of navigations in a day, rapidly adjusting. You think about sports teams, people who have slow, loose, or what they call effed up OODA loops, just move like they're stuck in molasses. Like, can we get more data, more analysis, decision paralysis, analysis paralysis, like just no decision. Most common thing we see. I think there probably is not one person who isn't frustrated at a manager, boss, colleague, subordinate, a spouse, a friend for indecision, right? Make the freaking call, right? The flip side are teams, spouses, colleagues, bosses, subordinates who just make calls not only fast, but correctly. And when they make it incorrect, they adjust so damn fast that you don't even see the error. Like, oh wait, you made a missed call. Yeah, but we then learned from that and corrected it and moved on and boom, look where it is now. This idea of a tight OODA loop is the single most important piece, not in the industrial age, but in this 21st century information age. The human brain power is what's key here. So OODA loop, and we defined over time kind of how to think of the OODA loop a little differently, right? So the red box is what we call the moat, the mother of all thematic errors. The way I call simply is the red box is playing defense. For most sports teams, the first thing coaches teach is defense. If you don't know how to play defense, you can't get in the game. It's like, no matter what you do, you're going to negate all of it because you can't play defense, which is why the foundation to most learning starts at defense. We're going to spend this class going into offense. Now, some of you may not want to play offense. Some of you may say, you know what? I don't need to play offense. Defense is all I need to do. I keep my life exactly as is, what I call the status quo, and I'm perfectly happy with the way it is. So I don't want to learn this. I don't need this. And that is totally okay. There are others, by the way, who are you're rocketing up and just kicking ass. And if you are, I would say make minor tweaks only. When something is working,
Minor adjustments.
Minor tweaks,
Yeah.
adjustments, because it's hard enough to succeed in life in general. If something is working, don't break it. Minor adjustments. But if something isn't working, if it's status quo, if it's everything being flat and exactly the same, the only way you're going to change your trend is to make a major adjustment. This is what we want to go into, learning how to play offense, right? And looking at the OODA loop, not only from this perspective of offense versus defense, but this notion of who. Who is a very different way to think about it, as opposed to projects and whatnot. But it's like, when I think about sense making on different individuals in my life, whether it's a colleague, a peer, a spouse, a child, anyone, and then the decisions I make that will impact them, that will actually be involved with them, that notion of looking at the entire OODA loop from a who perspective changes everything. It changes it from kind of divorcing people as a factor to making it all about people and learning to make people the number one lever of success or failure. And that is by the way, one of the biggest insights of the 21st century. If you have a plan to win, you have a plan to succeed, but it hasn't factored in people, not as part of the plan, not as number 4, number 5 in the plan, not even number 2, but if it isn't number 1 in your plans, you're gonna lose to the teams who make people number 1. Now, this idea that we think about a lot, that you can't think your way to behavior change, you have to action your way to behavior change. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I'm going to go into more depth, and I'm going to try to convince you of the importance of this in 2 ways. One is to try to influence your thinking, and the other is to actually, hopefully, get you to act. Okay?
Yeah, change your rituals.
Yep.
We're going to get to it.
All right. So I'm going to start off really quick. My wife yesterday sent me a write-up in Medium by Barack Obama. Right? So I think most of you know who he is. And he talked about the lessons he's learned in decision-making. The article was, to be honest, decent. For someone who had as big a role as he has, I kind of was expecting a little meatier. But there are 2 things I pulled out that I think was kind of cool. One was this. He said, one of the first things I discovered as president of the United States was that no decision that landed on my desk had an easy, tidy answer. The black and white questions never made it to me. Somebody else on my staff would have already answered them. We face this everywhere. The easy stuff gets done. The easy stuff, there's no conflict, decided, done. What's left, though, is the hard stuff. And you have to wonder, why does my life have so much hard stuff? There's a lot of hard stuff in our lives. So then further in the article, and I think because of what's happening with Biden, he kind of, Biden was his vice president. He basically talks about having at least one contrarian in the room pushed us all to think harder. And frankly, everyone was a bit freer with their opinions. And he was really happy that the contrarian didn't have to be him. Oftentimes for situations as leaders, bosses, everyone says we should all do this. And it's the senior person, the authority figure, who has to say, have we considered the other side? And then you start to argue against your own team, as opposed to if you're able to see your team take opposing sides in debate. I can't tell you as a leader, as an authority figure, how powerful it is to be able to weigh all sides, see if there's a side missing, and then make the right call. That's what I call good OODA looping. Good sense making with people involved, and then making the right call as a team, whether it's those individuals or as a leader. The person he's referencing here was Biden, right? I think in essence, kind of this is a backwards way of saying like Biden was so great. He had the courage to be contrarian when everyone wanted to go a certain way, and how much that helped him. But recognize this point. When you make a controversial point of view, right? As in it's contrarian to what the mob, what everyone in the room, what the team is saying, it will draw conflict. And conflict requires a tremendous amount of human energy, not only from yourself, right? I think there's the dean of the Harvard Ed School who almost phrased it this way. It literally can feel like you're jumping out of a plane. You know, when you do skydiving, that feeling, no matter what and how many times you've done it, it still has your heart racing and you're literally a leap of faith jumping out. You could get killed socially, career-wise, whatever it is, or it's going to be thrilling and you're like, wow, that was awesome. That same feeling occurs every time we see conflict. And when we're about to put out a controversial different point of view, the amount of human energy required is a lot.
Well, it also draws criticism, right? That's the conflict, right? The criticism
Well,
towards the person who just put out that controversial point
That's
of
what
view.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
if you agree to everyone, right, that's a safe choice.
You're going to get criticism and you're going to create conflict.
When everyone says we should all go, you're like, sure, we should go. But like,
Right.
it doesn't even matter. That's what they call herd mentality, right? There's a billionaire investor of ours who told me years ago, one of the lessons, Charlie, I want you to take away is this: all fish swim to where the food is. Learn to swim the other way. Another very successful board member of one of the biggest banks, investor of ours, also told me a similar thing, which is all people run away from the black hole of complexity. Learn to run straight to the center of the black hole of complexity. Like this idea, I mean, the head of HR at Chase, another investor of ours, said something very similar. Whenever I go into any organization, any team, and look at what's happening, I look for the areas where they say it was always done this way. I look for the areas where they've never looked, and I go in there. That's the contrarian point of view. But can you imagine when anyone comes in to do that, the amount of defensiveness, the amount of posturing politics, you're ruffling up feathers and suggesting people who were doing the job did it wrong. That's conflict.
Just so you know, I think, Wayne, you might be new to our class. We're letting people use the chat aggressively because we don't want it to feel like you have duct tape over your face and you can't speak, but obviously you can't interject into the presentation, but you can use chat. It's allowing me to get a sense of some of the questions, which we're not jumping into every single one yet. We're trying to get some of the meat of the presentation, but I'm watching it. So go ahead and put in the questions, reactions, thoughts, go on.
Voice muted, but
Yes.
typing
Voice
on the
muted, but
keyboard
typing
as
good.
much as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, except don't do anything inappropriate. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We had to teach someone a lesson on that. Okay, so I'm gonna go and walk you through this topic in two different ways. It's kind of like when you get baked potato two ways, right? You get steak two ways. So we're gonna talk about how to not avoid conflict in two ways. The first thing I'm gonna try to do in the short time is try to convince your mind. I'm gonna try to give you awareness backed up by people we've met, research and whatnot, why this is so important to go learn. And that will hopefully get you to a place where you do this, right? And by the way, this is a handwritten diagram that's been on the wall of Meg in my office for so long. The color has gone from purple to what looks like
Light purple?
light purple or just faded purple.
Faded.
And the number you see is 5%. This is 5% of the job. And some of you must say, no. I need a lot more than 5% of this. More time on this, because what it says in my handwriting is this: you have to change your mind before you change your habits, right? You've seen this. You have to want it. You know, how much harder it is for me to make any change if I don't want it, right? So I have to change my mind before I change my habits. And then there's the flip side of this argument. On the right side, awareness to action, there's always a back and forth of it. And by the way, so then if I go to the right side, the ritual work, right? So this was also on the other side of this handwritten diagram, the 95%. A lot of research we've shared before in some of the earlier LIP classes, action comes before motivation. Who says you have to feel like it? Have you ever sort of sat at home on the couch trying to get motivated to go work out, right? You're waiting for inspiration, right? Maybe someone will say something, you watch a show, you know, a perfect phrase, now I'm motivated to work out, as opposed to, you know, the act of moving your feet and the act of starting to move, action is what drives motivation. And usually the number one sustaining factor in motivation is momentum. You need trending momentum, whether it's losing weight, whether it's getting fit, whether it's actually working on mental stressors, learning how to play offense. If you don't have if you don't have momentum, you will not be able to sustain your level of motivation. You will not be able to make it part of you. And where this 5%, 95% comes from was a research piece that Jim Lear, who has written like 19 bestseller books, gave us a while back. This is how the human body is made. The yellow pie is our willpower. That's us saying, I have to want to do it if I want to do something. And we all overestimate the strength of our willpower muscle. And that willpower, we're approaching January 1, right? We're going to make New Year's resolutions. And I know if you did an honest audit of yourself, at best 5% of you or 5% of whatever resolutions you made, you ever kept. We like to promise, hold accountable, write it on walls, you know, say I will do something, but you don't do it. We fail, willpower fails us all the time. The 95%, which is the makeup of the majority of the human being, happens in our automatic. And automatic is something you build and develop through rituals until they become habitualized, that it just happens automatically.
It's just action before motivation, Chris, is the action before motivation. I think, Jay, you had a good comment. I think we're going to get to a little bit more of this after we kind of give you the setup here. But, Jay from the chemical company in Raleigh is saying, I agree that the contrarians, I agree 100% with the contrarian to make better decisions. However, there are some that always want to disagree, and they make things harder to get things done. I'm going to shut this. Sorry, there's construction and it's hot in here, but we're going to shut our window because the construction is loud. So they make it more difficult, right? The people who always are contrarian, that's super annoying.
And what's interesting? So the way I litmus test those people, sometimes I tell them, okay, I'm going to believe you that you're trying to be helpful, not hurtful, right? I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're trying to look out for the betterment of the team and get us to a better decision. So if that's the case, what would the other side of the argument be? Argue the other side. Show me that you're trying to help us as opposed to just be one-sided, digging your heels in, has to be your way. You're looking for us navigating correctly. Like oftentimes you can challenge people by different techniques. That's one of the techniques. I tell them like, hey, we can all debate, right? You ever see Old School with Will Ferrell when he goes and debates and blacks out? Like a debate competition is always that you can argue either side. So give me the other side of the argument. Because if you're on our team, you should care about understanding both possibilities because we need to ultimately navigate to the best choice. And you definitely do not have the most powerful and only working crystal ball in the world where your choice is the right choice. That's one way. The other way sometimes, depending on what the project is and how much risk you can underwrite, you might be able to carve a piece of the risk and say, you know what? Say Jay's friend is, let's say Greg. I'd say, Greg, fine. We're going to go with your suggestion then. All of it, 100%. You're in charge, CEO right now on this part. Go, right? Because you seem to have a strong point of view and I make them an owner. It's a lot easier to be a backseat driver until you actually give them the wheels of the car and say, fine, I'm going to let you drive this portion. And then you get a true taste of if they really are for the team and the enterprise, or they're really just trying to sound smart.
And what Julian's talking about here is that you have to be careful. If you're the contrarian too much, you don't get invited to meetings anymore, right? And this is where we're going to talk later about the balance that's needed to be contrarian, this balance of confidence and humility in both sides.
Well, we have to be careful because, see, it all depends. Like, it's all depending on the score. If your view was the difference of saving them from losing, or actually the difference that made someone win, you will be invited all the time. If your view was the reason it took longer and everyone got frustrated and were wasting time and arguing for argument's sake, at some point they will do what in the military call calm you out. You will be out of the loop in the information. So all of it depends. Like, this is the part, nobody can predict the future. You have to actually prevail. You have to succeed into the future. And if your insights were the unique insights that made a difference, well, people seek those people out all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on here, I'm going to jump into a couple slides on awareness, right? And some of you are going to love this. Some of you are going to hate this, right? I'm hoping you love it but if you don't, doesn't matter because I want to still give you homework. And the reason is this: the fastest way to do anything is actually to go in the sequence. I have to understand it, I get awareness, then they act. That is the most fast, effective way to do it. It just happens to not work for most of us. There's very few of us who can see something, get it, and then action it.
Like, I know being healthy is better. I want to lose weight, and then go do it.
Yes.
That doesn't happen very
And go
often.
do it is a near real-time implementation.
Right.
Those who do this well, you will see, they will see something, read something, and they will implement in 1 day or less, in 24 hours or less. Usually the litmus test I have and the great people I've met, if you implement in less than 24, if you're greater than 24 hours, you're not going to do it. Procrastination will get the better of you, right? I'm going to do it Monday. I don't think so. Those who do it in 24 hours or less. So keep that in mind. Most of you will not fall in this category, which is why this is just simply red wine discussion for you, but we're going to try to change your mind. Okay. First slide, I think that's important to understand this, is a picture. You can see the reflection here. I took this. Jim Lear is an amazing individual, 80-something years old. He was one of the noted as one of the top performance psychologists on this planet. And brought together and created this institute called the Human Performance Institute, and they coach the who's who of people over the years. And we're talking someone who,
Top
I mean,
sports
literally,
athletes, you name it.
but
Yeah.
not just sports,
Yeah.
medical
Corporate
doctors,
sports,
you know, the Blue Angels and special ops groups and FBI, Fortune 500 CEOs, everyone sought him out as the coach to help increase performance. Jim, we met now, I guess, almost 12 years ago or so, a while back. And we hit it off fairly quickly. He found something different in NextJump, and NextJumpers, the first day he walked in, he does this talk of different things and he couldn't believe what he saw. And as we got closer, we became one of the top case studies in his future books. When he teaches this 3-day executive leadership class, which I think he retired recently now, but he spends 20 minutes of it talking of NextJump and calls us what the demonstration project. I've never seen an organization actually do everything I see in research, and then I get research from them faster than anybody else. So when we went to Florida, this is probably even after like 10 years of knowing him, or 8 years, I saw this picture. I took a picture of it right away because this represents Jim Lehr. And I love this idea that the human body works like this. Now, I want you to think about it first physically, meaning when you do a hard workout, you are pushing your level of stress, energy out, so that bar is trying to go as high as possible to the point of failure, and then you do recovery. And the oscillation between stress and recovery is actually the signal, not only of human health, but also how strong you are. So the higher you go, you will have a matching lower recovery, and then the back and forth in tighter sessions, tighter up and downs, is literally how strong you get. When you talk to physical fitness trainers and they want to know how healthy you are, how strong you are, they don't measure how much you can stress yourself, whether it's running for longer at a high speed or lifting weights. They actually clock how long it takes you after the point of failure to recover. If they put you in the treadmill, you have to run at speed 10, say for a full minute, and then they say, okay, how long does it take for you to recover? If it takes you 10, 15, 30 seconds, you're in pretty good shape. If it takes you all day, and maybe even till tomorrow you can do it again, you're in really bad shape, right? If you can't even hit the stress thing, then that's a different issue, right? Like the point being, but that's how you train. The higher this goes, right? The equal recovery. And what people confuse is chronic stress. Stress without recovery is what creates burnout. Chronic stress. And so those who don't know how to navigate stress, usually you'll see, do not understand the importance of honoring recovery. When I see, and we've had the privilege of going inside observing the most elite of human beings, from doctors to ballet dancers to Olympic athletes to military, I mean, the best of the best in almost every field, or even in nonprofits and charter schools. Like, I mean, you're talking about rock stars across anything you can imagine, every age group. What's fascinating when you see the level of tempo and stress they can sustain, what you don't see is the blue part or the whatever, the greenish aqua part. Like, I'm always fascinated, right, of kind of how seamlessly and automatically they can recover just as fast as they can get stressed. Classic example of this was when we went to the CIA, Megan and I gave a TED talk there. And like the person who was hosting us, she's been there forever, giving us a tour of the place, right, with all the other guest speakers, right? I mean, these are pretty high power people there. And like, this was like a Thursday, I think we gave the TED talk. And she was like, wow, how much I learned from all you speakers. I've scheduled a date on Monday to sit down with my team to reflect on what we learned. And so she was like, I'm curious for you guys, how do you reflect? How do you go through the learnings and lessons? And like, everyone's like, oh, blah, blah, come up with different things. Megan and I, like, we already did. We did it during the bathroom breaks. During the bathroom breaks, we already talked along the way to the bathroom and just chatted. And so we've done our reflection, have already fired off notes to our team to action certain parts of it. And so now they're already experimenting. And she was like, what? I was like, I'm dead serious. Here you go. Watch the email and whatnot. Like, the whole point being, those who actually train harder on this get that good in the OODA loop. But now this is the problem that we don't understand. So that's physical, but think about mental now. Right? The exact same pattern works. The brain and the body works the exact same way.
You're saying that
High
people
stress.
get that if I push at high stress and the physical side, that's pushing to failure is what's good for you to grow.
HIIT workouts.
Your physical.
It's the most
physicality.
popular workout, right?
But on the emotional side, people don't believe that. They
I
don't
know
want to
during
do
the
it.
I know during the pandemic now, more people have figured out how to do 5-minute workouts, 10-minute workouts,
Yes.
and people will say, "What the hell's the point of a 10-minute workout or 5-minute?" Oh, if you do high intensity interval training, right? Even in 5-10 minutes, you can get better workout than even 30 minutes or an hour.
Mhm.
But how about the brain? The brain works the exact same way.
Yeah.
But here's what happens, right? Can you imagine going to a workout class and trying to conserve your energy? Do you ever go one of these Barry's boot camps or one of these crazy classes, right? And you're there and you're like, oh, I don't want to burn out, so I'm just going to hold back. So you're just going to go through the motions, and they're saying, do a jumping jack. You're like everything is just subdued,
Yeah.
right? And then when you recover, you're like, oh, I just need a sip of water, right? And someone's like guzzling water down and trying to catch their breath. You're like, well, I didn't spend a lot, so I don't need to recover as much. And human beings, and this is one of the craziest things Jim walked us through example after example and demonstrated to us. We think we're running out of energy. We think we have to conserve because I'm done, I'm dead. And he talks about the number of times you will come home. I cannot, no more. That's it. I'm just pooped, wiped out. And his point was, in the caveman days, when you're pooped and wiped out, you died. You literally died. The saber-toothed tiger will eat you, right? You collapsed and died. We actually are convincing ourselves we have no energy.
Yeah.
And yet Jim Lear showed us over and over again, I could make you walk 2 marathons back to back right now, right? And everyone's like, no way, I'm pooped. I have no energy. I would die. Well, how about if I put a narrative in your head that every member of your family will perish unless you complete this task? And suddenly everyone's like, all right, I can do this. Yeah. That means we have the energy. We just have convinced ourselves we don't. And the other crazy part people don't understand, human energy gets greater and stronger the more you train it to go up to the stress and then recover. The up and down oscillation is what actually increases energy. It's not like a finite thing that's
not finite, right?
Disappears. It's like a vessel that grows, and your ability to replenish it faster. So keep this in mind, because the reason we avoid conflict usually is because it's stressful.
Before you move on, Lindsay's asking, what are the signs that you're hitting chronic stress, right? Do you have metrics for recovery?
So can I tell you what's the craziest part about the most contrarian way to deal with chronic stress? To push even harder. Everyone take a breath, calm down, to go for a walk. Okay, and so if you've tried that, by the way, and it's worked for you, keep doing it. But if you're asking that question, my sense is you've tried all those things and it hasn't worked. Have you considered going the other way? What happens if I push myself 2 to 5, maybe 10 times higher? Because you know what happens to the human body, brain or body, when you go even higher in stress? There's a natural oscillation to recover. Mm-hmm. You will pass out. You will actually not be able to think. You will have to find
it's counterintuitive that you have to experience that peak, because then your body will naturally, if you think about, Peter, our instructor, Megan, you're going to get on the treadmill at an incline 10 on speed 10. At some point, I'm going to not be able to do it. And we're naturally going to have to physically recover. Yes. On the emotional side, it's the same thing. You have to push to then naturally recover. But everybody's looking for, when is it too much? And it'd be like it's like going to the gym and saying, okay, you want me to do that, but what's the recovery going to look like? And how long am I going to have to recover before you've even found out what you're going to do?
Which is what we want, right? It's like, I won't stress myself until you give me the recovery plan.
What's the recovery plan? How long do I get to sit down, take a breath? How much water can I have?
No, and as a trainer, I'd say, I have no idea how much recovery time you need, right? It depends on how healthy you are, right? It depends on how much you push yourself. Because if you just step on the treadmill and step off, I don't think you need any recovery time, right? So this is all, people have this backwards, the misunderstanding of conserving human energy, right? We do it, and it literally comes from the industrial age. It comes from the caveman times. This is on the brain, one of the biggest insights that we have learned. And this diagram I love for that
Chris
reason.
is asking, how does this relate or apply to emotional oscillations? That's what we're talking about.
So one of the classes we taught about the PEC, the physical, right, the emotional, as well as the chemical, right? Food, walks, sleeps, workouts, but even like when you talk about something serious, talking about something funny, there's amazing ways to oscillate. I think about oscillations. Everything can have an oscillation. But we have this crazy thought as human beings that if I stop thinking about the stressful thing, I'll forget it all. I don't know if you ever think that. Now, I need to keep stressing about this. Hand wringing is stressing because if I stop thinking about it, I'll forget it all. No. our subconscious mind starts processing it still. And the oscillations when you have the breakthrough. Like we have this bizarre feeling in our heads that it's about taking a sledgehammer and jamming our way through what seems to be a giant wall of no. Versus like maybe there are other more finesse, creative solutions under the wall, over the wall, sideways. I mean, maybe you can go through the wall. That is brain power. Manpower is brute force. We're still industrial age wired, which goes to kind of why this conflict thing matters. We had shared this in one of the earlier classes. The two largest changes that's occurred in 100 years is this. It has to do with speed, right? How everything just moves faster now. Success moves faster, failure moves faster, and you will look at it from a company perspective, but it comes down all the way from company to team, as an enterprise team to the individual. Individuals will succeed and fail faster also. This idea of speed, and the other part is decision making. Remember when the top role of most of us in the industrial age was followership. You didn't have to make decisions. And so here's the part you have to think about. The fastest way to make decisions is not what Daniel Kahneman called system 2. That's the logical brain. Computers getting together with other computers, which is what we call networking, right? Or the internet, is not the fastest way to make decisions, especially when all the black and white ones, as President Obama said, already got done. Black and white obvious decisions are already done. What's left for all of us is the hundreds, if not thousands, of non-obvious choices. The fastest decision-making machine on this planet to process uncertain, what the military called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, uncertain things is the human brain, but part of the human brain called system 1, otherwise known as our gut, otherwise known as our intuition. But here's the challenge that happens. When you have one person making a system 1 decision, it is pretty flawed. We have what we call biases and blind spots. So the fastest way to make decisions quickly is to actually have teaming. A team of system 1s smashing against each other, contrarian views to argue and figure out what the best thing to do, the sense making. But you know, when two intuitions, two gut reactions collide, the number one thing that shows up is conflict. There is no two human brains, no two human intuitions wired exactly the same. Even twins aren't wired the same. The minute you experience life and start chugging along the path of life, our system 1s change. Our mental models change. So two system 1s bumping up against each other will, no matter what, never be identical. And so it's a degree of conflict. A lot of us like to say, I know, I hate conflict, too much energy. It's close enough. Well, I hate to tell you, when you make decisions based on close enough, it's what we call fuzzy. Fuzzy OODA looping results in losing. You will not win. Life is too hard to win in fuzzy OODA looping. So the conflict is the issue. And when we think about the OODA loop, when we talk about playing offense, it's this left side here on the OOD. Making sense of stuff requires you to learn the skills of how to successfully navigate conflict with other people. And if you can't, you're only going to play defense. You never play offense. You know what they say in sports teams? A sports team that can't play offense and only plays defense is guaranteed to lose at best tie. You need to score to be able to win. Okay, so another way to look at it, the human brain, it shuts off when we are startled. It's usually when people say you're unaware, you're oblivious, but startled is a notion. We spent a lot of time with Josh Waitzkin, world chess champion, world martial artist champion, and this was one of his #1 strategies to beat his opponents. If I can startle my opponent, they shut off their brain, I can destroy them, I can win. Well, the flip side occurs. When we, as individuals, are startled, our brain shuts off. You know, one of the top things that startles our brains? Conflict. Conflict means you went into a situation and it worked out differently than I thought. Wait, I thought we all agreed. Wait, you mean you think, wait, what? Like, you don't like me? Oh my God, wait, so you want me to tell you what I have on you that I don't like? Like, conflict gets us startled. And in those startled situations, our brain shuts off and bad things happen. Navigating the complexity of life, I don't care if it's parenting, I don't care if it's leading, I don't care if it's just engineering. When our brain shuts off, nothing good happens, right? Now, this is a term that unfortunately I face, or we all face. Have you ever been consistently startled by the same who?
The same person.
Same person.
Consistently.
Every time you
Okay.
interact with them,
Yeah.
you're startled. Every time. And it's like,
You're like,
this
how-
idea of, wait a sec,
It's like
does
the
that,
same movie is playing out over and over.
does that make sense if someone consistently startles you? I always think about the idea if someone's around the corner and
Yeah.
they jump out and they say boo, and I'm like scared, right? Every time if they do it, they'll be like, Charlie, what the hell's wrong with you, right? At some point, is it really startling, or is it like a self-inflicted wound, right? At what juncture was I going to stop and say, okay,
This keeps
Okay.
happening.
you know, the pattern by individual, by the way, this is always by individual. You will see certain people you are more startled by than other people, and it's consistent, which means you have to realize it's not them, it's you.
Mhm.
It's a self-driven choice to not change and to continually be startled. And so that is something that you can work on.
It's
Okay?
very empowering. if you think about
OOC
it.
stands for out of control,
Out of
right?
control.
Like,
yes.
whatever
When
you
you
want.
get out of control and afterwards, why did that just happen? I intended not to do that. I intended not to flip out, argue, get in a huge fight. You know, that feeling,
Mhm.
why does this keep happening with the same person?
Every time, every time.
That's
You're
when
like,
you
okay.
feel out of control. How did that happen?
And then when we coach people, we're like, really? You were really surprised this time, huh?
Yeah.
This time, so what is it? The 6th time, the 12th time? You were so surprised that they did that. And then they're like, no, I wasn't, but I expected them to do better. I'm like, well, but
Yeah.
forget about like what your expectation was. Forget about this. Forget about their promises. Why were you surprised again for the 12th time? But we all do this, of course, right?
Yeah.
This is the whole, now I get it mindset. It's not going to happen now, right? Since you got it. Map your people who do this and you'll be fine. I'm totally being facetious, of course. It's not going to work. You'll still keep getting startled by the same people. Conflict, one way to look at it, as in how to get good at resolving conflict. This is one way to look at conflict. Conflict is figuring out what you want, right? Self-advocacy, that's the confidence, against empathy, what the other person wants. And I'm telling you, they're never identical. And it's very messy trying to strike the balance of understanding where the differences are in a very imbalanced way. And what you'll realize is that getting good at the skill is going to strengthen your OODA loop. It's going to make you a rock star, the kind of talent every leader in every organization needs more of, which is someone who's able to make sense of the most complicated, non-black and white stuff that exists faster, because they can navigate the different points of views of team members, extract it out and make sense of it and help us get to the best decision really fast. Otherwise known as a tight OODA loop. So this is a way to think. Don't you want to learn how to resolve conflict, right? Find that balance between understanding someone else's point of view, but being able to also hold your ground on your point of view, and then navigate what Jim Lear always called threading the needle under stress.
Mhm.
Can you thread the needle under stress and figure out how to navigate the 100 decisions in the right way to succeed and win? Losing should not be an option.
You know, Lindsay's saying the premise is that you work on oscillations between conflict and recovery, assuming that after a conflict, you need recovery. She's saying, because I know, because it emotionally drains me. That's the typical, right? It's emotionally draining. So we want to avoid it. That's why we want to avoid it, because we feel like our energy is limited.
And I was going to say, first recognize that emotionally draining is
Yeah.
by who? Watch your
Yes.
pattern. It's by person. In fact, the people who drain you, even them coming close to you, an email from them will feel drain.
Yeah.
You know, like that, you didn't even read the email. Oh, but I know what their things are usually, boom, drain. So just recognizing that is the first part.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you
Yeah,
gonna say?
yeah, I know what she's saying. And so that's why you need oscillations between conflict, which is the recovery.
But you know what you'll find? Here's what's interesting.
Yeah.
Another way of oscillating. They're individuals who they call them energy vampires, right?
Yeah.
Even just seeing their email in your inbox or text, right? They're other side people. The people you see their email, you're like, oh, like you want to read it. They energize you. By individual, they're people who, boom, drain your energy without even knowing what they said. And they're people who do the opposite.
Obviously, the ones with conflict is where she's saying you need recovery, right? Not the ones.
But I'm saying a recovery
wait to
is
read that
actually,
email.
I'm saying a recovery is seeking out the person who fills your cup with energy.
Ah,
You can oscillate between who's.
the recovery is seeking out the person who fills your cup.
Yep. And that's not someone who pep talks you with sweet lies. Be careful. We always fall for that stuff. You'll see it's the person you don't have conflict with is where you feel great. You feel lighter. Being around people you don't have a lot of eggshells to crutch, you feel lighter.
Yeah.
When you have eggshells built over time, it feels heavier and heavier, and it feels like this. Have you ever heard of the boiling frog fable, right? That a frog, when it jumps into a pot of boiling water, right, jumps right out because it will die, of course. But if you put it into warm water and bring it to a slow boil, the frog stays in there and will be cooked and die. So I think it was Al Gore who shared this story big time as he did the whole climate change stuff. But here's the part of the story I didn't learn about until we put this together. The reason why the frog can't jump out is this. You put a frog into the warm water, and as the temperature increases, the frog starts to adjust for the temperature change. That takes energy. But as a result of this compensation, by the time the water gets too hot, it is unable to jump out because it's depleted of energy. This is what I call the cost of compensating. When we don't address something early, we compensate. Then it goes wrong again and we compensate. And by the time we need to correct, we are drained and exhausted and out of energy. So as a result of it, we don't have the human energy, at least we tell ourselves, to correct it. Most conflicts are too small to bother correcting every single time. So we leave it, and we leave it until it feels like we're the frog in boiling water, and now we don't have the energy to be able to go and do anything about it.
Like a snowball effect,
It's awful.
right?
It's awful. The last part of the awareness I'll leave you is this. Sam Altman, some of you may have heard of him, many of you in non-tech haven't. He was the mentee of Paul Graham, who created Y Combinator. So Airbnb went public today. DoorDash went public, I think, yesterday. 2 companies that came out of Y Combinator. It's the single most prestigious startup incubator in the world. I mean, if you get into the program, it's 3 months. You have to move to San Francisco. Well, now I'm not sure if you move, but literally just getting in the program gets you automatic hundreds of thousands of dollars in checks from investors, just blind because you got accepted. So Sam Altman was the mentee that Paul, who the founder of Y Combinator, groomed. He became the president. Now he's the chairman of Y Combinator. He's worth quite a bit of money. But there's a recent quote he shared that I love. He said, "I still underestimate the power, the compounding power of rapid execution, right? And iterated learning feedback loop." That's what I call the OOD of the OODA loop. Sam didn't talk about OODA loop, but I'm put that in. A commitment to this is the closest thing you can get to guaranteed success. And depending on what role you're in, right? Whether you're a parent, whether you're in the military, whether you're actually in a job that kind of matters, right? Don't you want to learn anything that is the closest thing to guaranteed success? Guaranteed success is not something that is lightly used or offered very much in human lives, right? In the world today, what actually do you know that someone can say with credible view and experience, this is how you get guaranteed success? So I think about speed, I think about the decision-making power, and when you do this right, in 2 or more system ones, that is the closest thing you can get to guaranteed success. Why would you not want that? Why do you not see that as I must now do what I'm about to present to you next? Now, some of you will still say, you know what, it's kind of interesting. I have some countering points of view. You know what, I have to think about it more. It's what we call, I intellectually agree, but I'm not sure. You know, like, I don't think about this. I'm gonna have to look at my notes. Maybe Sunday or Monday, or maybe after the holidays, maybe during the break,
Yes. New Year's resolution in January.
Reread this thing, watch the video, and think about this. Maybe it's not for me, right? Okay, so that's got to be some of you, right? Some of you are sitting here thinking, "Oh, what an asshole," what's up? But that's different. But those of you don't need to listen. Remember, this is free. You don't need to be here, so please leave if that's how you feel. But this other part, right? A lot of us will see the willpower. We will mean to do it, but we won't be able to. So this is the part that matters. I want you to go do this. I'm going to give everyone here homework, right? So right now, how many people on here? 128. We're going to give you homework, and some of you are sitting with at least more than one person, just social distance, right? Okay, the action part. There's a talk, if you want to watch, that's on the COA video site by a guy named Jia Jiang. I mentioned him before. When I first was introduced to this guy, he sought us out and was like, "Oh my God, you're the guy Simon Sinek wrote about in his book," and all this stuff. And we met him, and he gave this talk on how to present and how he learned to present. And I was like, this guy just has a strong Chinese accent, can't present well. But I listened to his presentation, and I was like, he's hilarious. And what he found was people fear rejection, right? We fear getting no, right? men fear getting rejected all the time, but just even everyone fears rejection, which is why we don't even ask. And so he did a ton of research on how do you deal with and get stronger in this primal fear we all have of rejection, of getting no. And every research pointed to one thing. You have to go on a journey, a training program of getting rejected 100 times. And in the attempt to try to get rejected 100 times, you will get over your fear of rejection. He calls it rejection therapy. So I'm going to introduce conflict therapy, but in rejection therapy, he went to literally get rejected 100 times, right? And the first person he tried to get rejected with, the building he worked in before he quit his job, he asked the security guy, hey buddy, can I borrow $100? Maybe can I just have $100? And the guy's like, no. And then he was about to walk away and he went back to him saying, why'd you say no? And the guy explained, because I don't quite know you and I'm not sure what you want to do with it. And he was explaining all this stuff and kind of alluded that maybe if you give me a really good reason, I'd consider it. So he went on this journey saying, I'm going to get rejected 99 more times. And he went and did some crazy stuff, right? He went to someone's house in Texas, knocked on their door with a soccer ball and said, can I play soccer in your backyard? And some dude opened the door, looked at him and said, sure. He went to a police car that was parked and said, hey, officer, can I drive your car or just around the block? And the officer looked at him and said, fine, go ahead. He went on a commercial airplane and went to the stewardess and said, hey, can I give the safety announcement? I think they're more likely to pay attention if I do it than you. And they looked at him like crazy and then said, sure. What he found out in trying to get rejected 100 times, around half the times he was trying to get rejected, he got a yes. The things that, meaning he was unable to predict how it was going to turn out. In his head, every single one was an anticipated no. Mm-hmm. But more than half or around half turned out to be a yes.
It's just like every conflict that you go into, you fear something really bad happening,
yes.
Right?
So here is the practice I want you to think. This is just a random picture on the internet of random people faces, but this is kind of how we meet people these days, right? On Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatnot, different bodies, right? And the conflicts are always correlated to who. And so this is a slide we got from the military, which we love, from the Navy. They call it above the waterline versus below the waterline. There are things in our lives, if we blow a hole below the waterline on the ship, it will sink and kill everybody. But if you blow a hole above the waterline, it might not look pretty. It won't look pretty, but the ship's not going to sink. I want you to think about where can I underwrite conflict, as in with who, where going wrong isn't going to kill us. It's not going to kill it, whatever my job, whatever it is, because that's where I can underwrite versus there are places where it's hard to underwrite conflict going wrong. Then I want you to map those individuals. Because what I don't want you to do is saying, Charlie told me to go do this practice, right? Even though I don't believe in it, I'm going to start with the guy at the bottom with the glasses, right? The white guy at the bottom, who basically could fire me if I do this wrong. Do not start there. Please do not start there. Start easier, but then push yourself. The idea of stress and recovery to get harder and harder. And as you do, you will build the skills. So this is the last slide we have. This is the homework for everybody here, right? You don't have to agree. I'm going to give you 1 week before we meet next week, and we will ask you in the chat to punch in how many times you practice this in 1 week. Okay? So
the caveat to this is you can lead in, or the caveat or the disclaimer, start by saying, I'm practicing. Be honest. I'm practicing.
Going into conflict.
Not avoiding conflict, going into conflict. Yes. Here's my truth. Here
yes.
it goes. But give them your truth, which is I'm practicing. This is hard for you. For some of you, this may not be that hard for you, but
be careful. Be careful and then write a giant paragraph about I'm practicing, because then people actually feel sorry for you and all this stuff. Like don't draw out sympathy. Just simple. I'm practicing, not avoiding conflict, and then just fight. That's all you're going to say.
And I'd like your feedback.
Oh well, so then I would suggest write it at the very end. For me to practice, though, I need your truthful reaction.
Truthful reaction.
I need you to be truthful. I need you to do it quick. Mm-hmm. Ask them for reaction. So what I want you to do is this. I'm curious here, who will be able to do the most numbers by next week? Okay. But here's the minimum homework. 2. I want you to go and not avoid conflict, at least in 2 different instances. 2. And if you're going to do 2 with any goal you want to hit, that means you have 1 you must complete in the next 24 hours. Otherwise, it's no good. Because if you get half the goal completed, trust me, by next Thursday, you will get the other one. But if you have 0, and by next Wednesday, you're going to do none. So if you're serious about this, which we will like you for, right? That means you have 24 hours to go into conflict, right? Not avoid conflict with one person, at least once. Now, here's the other caveat that's important to give you a tip, not caveat, but a tip. You'll find when you go into conflict with someone once, it's the same as 0. You're gonna have to push at least 3 times. And that counts as 3 practices, by the way, right? So if you do it over phone, if you do it over email or Slack or whatever you use, right? You give them your dose of, truth. They respond back. And oftentimes the first response is, okay, great, thanks. I appreciate you doing that. That's a kiss off, right? Your level of energy investment did not match up with what they put. You challenge them again saying, hey, you know what? You didn't really address any of the things I said, right? And so I'm going to guess now. The reason is because you think I'm a blah, 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 and you explain more on stuff and then see what they come back with. You're going to likely have to go 3 times per person to be able to get some.
Everybody's face looks like horrified right now. So we'll take some thoughts.
And the last part I have here is this. Think of it as a ramp. The ideal way to practice this is over 3 months or 13 weeks. You want to start with 2 minimum and you want to ramp up. And if you can't, remember, if you only do 2 a week, it's going to take you 50 weeks, pretty much a year.
Yes.
But if you can ramp it up and you can get to completing this exercise in 13 weeks, that's going to get you to be different. You will feel the momentum off the action. And then suddenly looking at the mindset part may make more sense. And for those of you who are kind of psychotic and crazy and want to complete this in 1 week, or actually get 50 in 1 week, I'm telling you, you're going to hurt yourself and hurt a lot of other people, right? Do not do that, right? So don't underdo it, which is 0 and 1, right? 2 is the minimum. Don't overdo it, right? But we'll see who comes back with a good sustainable number for weekly rhythm, and you can then extrapolate how many weeks it'll take for you to get to 100. And we'd like to see everyone at least do 2. Whether you agree with it the beginning or not, just try it.
It's interesting. Tina saying, I don't have that much conflict. I'll have to look for it. Someone saying it's not in my character. They're nervous.
So the one thing we have found, people who actually think they have not much conflict are usually the ones who have the most. Like, I hate to tell you this. That means people are walking on eggshells all around you. You just have to pay attention to the details. Like, the best way I was telling Megan, I think of conflict.
Of course, Sheila, you can totally apply it to personal life relationships. For some of us, some of that is below the waterline, as it can get, it depends on who, but this is where spend some time to map out who is on the top and who's at the bottom in terms of where it's going to be scarier and it's going to be harder to underwrite that conflict going wrong.
But it's interesting, this idea. So I don't know if you saw this. I think it was the governor of Arizona, who basically has declared, the state's like in total disarray with COVID, that he wants everyone to assume every human being walking around has COVID. And literally just anyone you meet, family members included.
Good assumption, right?
It's a good assumption to assume everyone you meet has COVID. And if you do that, you're more likely to be better, right? So when it comes to conflict, right? You're like, I don't have a lot of conflict in my life. It's like COVID. It's all around you. And unlike the ability to avoid COVID, conflict is the only way to avoid conflict is not to be around, talk to, communicate with any human being.
Yeah.
If you are able to cut off all ties, all communication with any human being, you will actually have probably close to 0 conflict, only conflict with yourself, right? Meaning so some of you may have that, but I guess even over digital forms and whatnot, there's conflict all around us, even worse than COVID, and it's unavoidable. And needing to learn the skill of how to resolve conflict, how to navigate conflict as critical data points to better your decision-making, your judgment calls. All the value literally lies if you could read the minds of every other human being around you on anything. If you could navigate with their insights, it's like Professor Xavier or Jean Grey from X-Men, you'd be unbeatable, right?
It's interesting. Heather's bringing up, she's afraid to hurt someone's feelings when you try to self-advocate. Like, I hear you, right? Because we had taught last week about why we don't, right? How to do this the wrong way. And the narrative that goes through is they can't handle it. I think it was the 4th one that we showed, ways to avoid conflict, is that they can't handle it.
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to pull up the presentation from last week. We did something counterintuitive. We tried to teach you how to avoid conflict, right? Yeah. And one of the top ways was that. I don't know if you remember this slide. This is the Wes Moore slide.
Yeah.
Basically, people are way stronger than you think. And The story of Westmore, if you look at last week's video, is this. We have the ability as just adults, everyone here is an adult, we have the ability to influence someone and turn them into what I call the prison Westmore versus the White House Westmore. So when you think someone is weak, imagine replacing the language with this, right? They're incapable. They can only, they can't handle the truth. They can only take lies. By making and expecting them to be that bad, we are part of how someone becomes what I call the prison Westmore. True story of like 2 Westmores. Same backgrounds, one in prison for life, the other one is now the CEO of one of the largest nonprofits in the world.
Do you guys want to punch in any questions because we're talking at you? Let's take a minute. I think there's already some chats going on, but if you have more questions, we have a little bit more time. We can stay. If you have to go, you have to go. But we'll stay for a little bit longer. Interesting. Tina, yeah.
You know what's interesting, Tina? Tina, do you want to unmute and ask maybe more depth of what you're asking or talking about here? It's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I don't see conflict in my life because I don't have strong opinions. And I feel like I've sort of taught myself not to have a strong opinion. Like, I'll just let everyone else have a strong opinion, and whatever the majority decides, that'll end up being good. So I really think in some of your classes, you've said to start having opinions, like just on my own, what I'm seeing on the news. What do I really feel about that? Because I think I'm just used to, I'll just be likable. I'll let other people have strong opinions, and then that's how I avoid conflict. And then I don't see conflict.
So can I tell you, Tina, what's interesting? I'm willing to bet, I don't know if you're married or have kids or not, or even your parents. I'm willing to bet if we ask your spouse about that.
Not so true with my spouse.
So what ends up happening is this. Human beings have a very bizarre way of finding a way to balance the imbalances we create. If we suppress our opinions in one place, we will overdo our opinionated, judgmental self in some other places because you've been holding back. And so it's like, but I don't have an opinion, but why does it show up in like a lion on fire on that side?
That's really probably true.
So think of it this way. One of the stats that helps is this. People generally can type 60 words a minute. You can speak at 300 words a minute. Our brain thinks at 3,000 to 4,000 words a minute. So meaning whatever you're speaking, right, we're 10 times that is what we're actually thinking. So when someone says, I don't have an opinion, you have just found a way to narrate and convince yourself you don't.
Yeah.
And so then I always say, can I see the idea of like seeing you, say with your spouse versus like say at work, you are the same person. You is you, same person. And so I always try to look as a coach for a psychological mirror. I want to find a way to show you that is not what you're saying you are. So I look for parts of your life where I'm like, oh, no. You just told me you have no opinion. I'm just nice. I'm not sure your husband thinks that. I'm assuming he's like, oh, I don't know if Tina would, that's not the words I would use, right?
Yeah, he gets my opinion. That's so true.
Yeah, I told my husband I was struggling with this topic. And we're teaching it. He was like, "You don't struggle with me, right? It's going somewhere." You should tell them about the poker.
Oh, fascinating experiment we did this week, which I'm trying to get the Navy team to do it, which we have to work around the military rules. There's 8 people, we call them the operational 8, who have operational control of all the resources of our company. And they, like most people, despite us being like the best at this, really just suck still at actually conflict, going into it and dealing with it. And they run the business, right? So I have a thesis, which is if I had them play a high stakes game of poker, they're going to see that they act the same way playing a game of poker as they do when they meet as a team of 8 to figure out how to run the business. And so, like, of course, they didn't want to do it. I was like, you know what? You're going to do me a favor. I'm the CEO, right? At least co-CEO. Do me a favor. I'm going to force you to play this game. 2 hours, high stakes. You're going to risk your own money, right? You can't opt out. You have to keep playing and win. And the difference in poker is this. Poker is a zero-sum game. When someone loses, I win. It's a solo sport. And I win by seeing others lose. It's a game of complete lying, hiding, faking, and basically bluffing and fooling everyone, right? I mean, and so this is like, but it's a game where we spent time with world poker champions. They win poker games 3% of poker is system 2. Knowing how to play the numbers and mathematical cards, 3%. 97% is system 1. Being able to use your intuition to read yourself and them reading you and back and forth. And to prove the point, this one poker champion played an online poker game. If you play Texas Hold'em, only cards you can't see is 2 cards you hold and 2 cards everyone else hold. They put a piece of tape and covered their hold cards, their 2 cards. They played the entire tournament not seeing what cards they get, and they won the whole tournament simply by reading the other people they're playing against. That's the power of system 1. Most of what's happening in our lives is 97% driven by system 1. We tend to opt out of it and want to go to, let me look at the data and this and that. You can Google search data in any way you want to support whatever you want. You will see the power of being able to play. So we had them run this experiment. They ran it yesterday, reluctantly for 2 hours. And now we're doing a reflection on what came out. It is freaking fascinating. I cannot believe how similar they acted in the game and the reflection of each other to what's happening in real life. And they lost a few $100s each, but every week they're losing hundreds of thousands and millions at risk by playing poker, even though they're on the same team. And so just giving an example of just an interesting way sometimes to coach your people.
You know, Eli's asking if we'd put an example presenting one of the 100 conflicts in practice. I think next week, if you do some of it over email, bring it. I think you should bring it. We might be able to, you know, show some examples because it's in the nuances. I'll give you, for instance, for me this week, you know, I gave some truth to somebody on the above the waterline for me, and it's unbelievable. My reaction, I give a lot of truth. And then I saw the response and I was so quick to think, it's good enough, actually, because it's so much more than
exhausting.
It's
scary.
exhausting, right? And it's so much more than you mean the truth that I gave.
Because giving truth to someone, right, with the level of depth, like the ladder of Zen for everything,
yeah, it's heavy.
It literally feels like jumping out of a plane. So you feel like I'm so wiped from that.
Yeah.
When they write back with something that does not match up to what you invested, it feels a little wrong. Yeah. But I don't want to go again out of a plane again. Yeah. So we go into thank you very much, or just their kiss off gets another kiss off from you, right? There was
which is why the 3 times, even with one person, before you actually are truly going into the conflict, it's so easy to do a kiss off.
There's a slide at every step in the parking lot, which if you can see this, right? This idea of the relentless pursuit of truth. People hear the word conflict and they just use the word fights or call out culture. Don't use that, because you know what? When you use those words, it gets you to not play. It gets you not to go and get healthier and stronger. So it's not about fights. It's not about call out culture. How about the relentless pursuit of truth? And I don't know if you ever heard the phrase devil's in the details. Well, God is in the details as well. Yeah. You will see the difference between winning and losing, right? When something works or something doesn't work is in the details. When you lose, it's in the details. When you win, it's in the details, which is why when it comes down to figuring this out, you're gonna have to get to the details. And the nuanced details matter. And human beings are so good at reading. They say there's no better machine to detect a human, like lie or fabrication of truth or left something out than another human being.
Eden, I don't know if you're still here. Eden Hurd Smith from IFF. I thought you made a good point, a reaction. I don't know if you're still here, if you want to unmute. So you can just scroll on if Eden is here. Eden, are you still with us? If not, I'll just read it out. That was a great question or a great comment. Eden saying jumping into conflict involves making yourself vulnerable, and it feels scary to put the flashlight on yourself, right? Now all eyes are on you. And this is that notion of the criticism. You're going to draw criticism. You're going to draw conflict, right? And this is this is why this is so important to get truth.
So I mean, once again, we had to argue a lot last night about what slides I can put in and can't put in, the editor-reporter sort of relationship we have here. Right now? No, I'm not blaming you, but I'm saying, you know what? One thing that I know probably every person is trained to try to get better at is risk-taking, right? Yeah. We try to train our kids to do this better. Our managers try to train us. We go to workshops how to do risk-taking. The greatest risk-taking is actually putting out a point of view that will draw criticism, that will draw conflict. Someone says something, they're so sure, and they're really sure of it, to throw out an opposing point of view. That risk-taking for us, in the 21st century is tied to who in our lives. It's the risk taking by who. It is the hardest thing to do. It is the thing that shows up the most often. And if you are unable to take risk, you will end up in the exact same place as you did the day before. There is a slide. I'm sorry, I was going to share real quick. Sorry, we have a lot in the parking lot, which is all the stuff I was not allowed to share, but it's okay. No, not allowed to share. I'm exaggerating. Megan's fantastic.
Yes.
But this is kind of so messy. But this idea of, if yesterday looks like today, that looks like tomorrow, right? I don't know if you've ever shown you this slide. When they do research and word about burnout, the true thing in research, burnout occurs from the status quo. Burnout occurs not from overwork, not from stress, not from too much work. It literally comes from just being the exact same. And in this slide, I've shown this many a time, we animate. When you see a plant, because it's organic, that's what growth looks like. Burnout looks like this. If you ever see a plant that looks like this, most of us will say, it's what we call an NQR. Something's not quite right. I think it's rotten underneath the roots. It's probably dead. That's burnout. We achieve burnout when we look at our lives, and yesterday simply being representative of our past, just look 90 days back, then the present, and then look 90 days forward. So that's a window of 6 months. If yesterday equals today equals tomorrow, you're in a scary path of burnout. Mm-hmm. And you have to recognize when you head towards that. It's horrible. Depression, anxiety, everything. And can I tell you what happens too? People run away from those who are burning out. People gravitate towards winners with the belief that they might be able to help and influence me and motivate me. And they run away from people who are not growing, who are burning out, who are constantly staying flat. You will see this as a manager, as a leader, teams joining your team. I mean, people literally run for the hills, and some do it more aggressively, others do it passive aggressively. They just tell you less. If they don't give you a lot of truth, they don't give you a lot of details, because why bother, right?
Tiffany, my Atlanta girl, you put in a comment, maybe a little bit of a question. Do you want to unmute?
Sure. I forgot my question. Yeah, so no, I was just saying, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing number one, conflict is unavoidable, number one, but to me, it's just seemed as if we're walking around thoughtless, people are. So I think we really need to help bring awareness when we feel as if we can't avoid, or when we don't want to bring up conflict, like we really have to do that. So previous years, I was the one that did not like conflict, and I try to skirt around it. But as I'm getting older, I realize, I have to speak up, because when I don't, it's like a tug of war, within me. So.
Yes.
It's like that feeling when you feel someone else needs some truth and you need to give them truth, but they're not, showing that they really want any of it. So but you need to do it.
I was looking at the title slide for last week's presentation was, if you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you start a war inside yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the boiling frog. You will compensate for the conflict, the eggshell you didn't crush. And the more you compensate with that individual, at some point, you will not have the energy to jump out of the pot of boiling water, even though you should. Now that's a frog and all that stuff, but it's helpful to think about it where, I think about conflict, and one of the narratives people have as well, I don't want to be thoughtless and hurt people left and right. Do you know how thoughtless conflict is done? It's usually when you're startled, when you're not using your brain, when you're unaware, right? And you're oblivious is when you do thoughtless conflicts, reckless moves that hurt other people. It's like, imagine going for skydiving. I've never done it, but imagine skydiving. And as the plane is going up, I'm like, I'm just going to down this bottle of vodka. Maybe I'll down a bottle of tequila because I'm jumping out anyways. See how idiotic that would be? But that's what we do. We literally get drunk and startled and unaware when we're jumping into what feels like jumping out of a plane. You need to have your senses on, right? Which is why most of us tend to be so bad at this, have such a 100-year ingrained narrative and behavior built in to avoid conflict. Because when you run a factory, you don't need a lot of conflict. Can you imagine a manager of 1,000 employee factory, do you think that manager wants to see 1,000 people arguing every day with they don't want your opinions. They want you to just clock in and get your job done, right? Like, you have an idea how to do it better. Okay, maybe put it in the suggestion box, like, which is my way to silence you, right? Like, kind of just get the job done and just shut the hell up, right? And they don't, and if you have drama, we'll let both of you go, right? We were built and wired for followership. But here's the part. Every company and organization we looked at now, every leader we meet is frustrated that going down to every person, down to the most junior new hire, that they need to make an adjustment for what's in front of them. They need to all be decision makers adjusting for what's in front. It's impossible for the person on top to make all the calls, everyone. But to make the right judgment calls, you need to know what the situation is. And so everyone's like, well, let's run another report. Let's do this. No. The people in the team, in the situation, have a better read on what's happening than anybody, stronger than any Google database you could find. And so, and because, by the way, the stuff the Google database and AI can do, black and white, done, easy. It's the hard stuff that's left, that the only machine as of now to process that is human beings, but you need to learn how to work with other human beings' brains. Not strength, physical manpower, but brain power. And that is just wrought with conflict. So.
Can I ask, because Lori asked always a good question. She's asking, maybe this is the last one we'll do, but unless there's something else, but one more, but who make the feedback more meaningful? I don't know, Lori, if you're here, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, I'm trying to kind of figure out when we were approaching people about having conflict and just getting their feedback from that, how can we kind of take that and make it meaningful? And I know there are some people who, if we approach them, they're going to be very volatile, and others are going to be receptive to that. So I was kind of trying to understand how to make it more meaningful or get some sort of takeaway from that.
Yeah, so I would not use the word meaningful, because meaningful implies success, right? It's almost like, hey, I'm going to go train, but I'm going to win. No. Training is where you fail, because you're not good at something and you need to explore and try stuff. They say in the military, all the work we've done, those who get shot in training survive at war, and those who never get shot in training usually are the ones who die, right? So recognize the difference between training and when you're at war, right? So I don't think about meaningful. I think about truth. I want truth. That's what I want. And I'm going to go for this relentless pursuit of truth. My truth against someone else's truth in any situation. So that's the first thing I think about. So as opposed to looking at the end point of that was successful and worked well. Like, remember, Jia Jiang went to get rejected. He didn't go to get a yes. He tried deliberately to get rejected. The 100 practices, as you ramp up, you're going to try to go into conflict that's more and more difficult, meaning harder and harder to get truth, right? Your truth against their truth. That's what you're looking for. But then the other part of the advice I would say is, don't forget ask yourself the question, can I underwrite this conflict going wrong with this person? Can I underwrite it, right? Like, meaning don't go to the boss who actually is about to determine your bonus right now, has the power to let you go, change your career bad. Do not say, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go for it. That would be thoughtless. That would be reckless. In many ways,
you're saying to Lori too, because you mentioned the word volatile. Don't go to the most volatile person to start, right? Right.
It depends. Maybe you really want them out of your life.
That's true. That
right?
Could be.
And so you might say, you know what, I'm willing to underwrite this because they've been such a jerk. So if it really works out wrong and they don't see me anymore, maybe that's a good riddance for me. So that there's an instance where you could. But this is the part you have to imagine when it goes wrong, can I live with that? And you'll be surprised how much you could live with, because you can always go back and rectify it, you know? And if you have to blame me for the practice and say, sorry, like, not really what I meant, but I've been trained this way, so I'm just practicing, right? Practice. Like I said, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And perfect practice not only is something you got to do in the next 24 hours, right? It is also simple, which is why I want you to think this is just 2. And if you're really saying, I really can't even find 2 in my life, then just open your eyes and just ask people. In fact, why don't you go and tell some of the people in your lives exactly that? have been told to try to at least go into 2 points of conflict, but I have none in my life, right? Nobody has conflict with me, right? Like if you go and start to, and just elaborate, like you're just the nicest person in the world, right? You just like, there's absolutely none. I mean, there's a zero, like, and then really challenge them saying, is this a true statement? Can I go next week to this class and saying, you know, I think I'm one of the few human beings on this planet who literally has zero conflict, right? Validated by my spouse, my, you know, children, by my colleagues, like, you know, like by my boss, like just go and push. That alone will be your practice. Just trust me.
That's a great way to draw it out.
You might be able to draw out the truth, right? And if you really still have none, then the next thing I would evaluate is what have you signed up for in life? If you signed up to do nothing meaningful, you will see that there usually is no need for risk taking. There's no need for feedback seeking. There's no need to find conflict or good, risky, creative decision making. Low stakes status quo complacency is another way to avoid conflict. So you have to watch for how much you're playing that role. This is the big topic. I sense over the course of more LIP classes, we will go more into this. But next week, right, we're going to start off by asking you your number, right? How many times did you practice? So remember, keep it sustainable. Do not shoot for 50. You crazy military people who are like, I'm going to show them, like, no, don't go for 50, right? No need to do that, right? I would think if you go above 20, it's kind of starting to get a little borderline psycho. So don't go psycho on us, but don't do 0 or 1, 2 minimum, right? And then come prepared to share some of the stories. I think it'll be interesting what we learn, what we pick up. All right. Thank you, everyone. Maybe some feedback, Laura. We'd love to hear from you. As you said, we put out some critical stuff, controversial stuff, right? Want to hear it?
Yeah, maybe we can share more about the poker. Brent was asking. Maybe even later today, Brent, we can share more. But what we find out about people.
Fascinating.
Yes, away from the work table into the poker table. Just
same people. Same people. Right? We always say, play one sport, the sport of you. Don't try to act like, well, I play different sports. I'm a different person when I'm at work than at home, and when I do this, and when I, no, you're the same person.
I know. It means it's inside us. We can do it if we want to.
You're the same person.
If we practice. I shouldn't even say we do if we want to. We can do it if we practice.
No, I think psychopaths, or what's the thing Brene said?
Yeah, psychopaths.
Psychopaths are the people. Maybe you're
sociopath.
Sociopath. So
unless you're a sociopath.
Which is possible, right? Then you could be 2 people. At least, or 16.
About Jen saying thank you, I'm terrified. Yeah.
Now, this is scary stuff, right?
It is.
But I'm telling you, if you do the mapping on the boat, you will see it's not as bad as you think.
If you need our help, by the way, MegaChart next jump. You know what? During the week, as you're going through this, even in the next 24 hours, email us. Yeah. We're all in this together. This is not a. This is a huge topic. We are all conflict avoiders.
Yes.
There's very few people who wake up
I was
and are
going
like,
to share
no,
this.
I am. I go right into it. I'm like, BS.
So I was going to share this story real quick, which I'm sorry, you guys are all late, but so one of the people we got to know really well was Simon Sinek. Some of you may know him, like a big TED Talk speaker, Start With Why and whatnot. So there was a window for almost 6 months, I would say, 3 to 6 months, where we would have these marathon brainstorm sessions where it would be like me, Simon, Megan, and sometimes Simon's president. And it would be like 6-hour marathon brainstorm sessions. And, you know, Simon is aggressive, so am I. So we'll both take a giant wall with a whiteboard marker, and we'll be scribbling. I mean, I love this theory stuff as much as anybody else. And we'll be scribbling and sharing our thoughts. And we'll be going and writing on each other's graffiti, and 6-hour marathon runs, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week, for like 3 to 6 months, right? And it's like, love this stuff. And it was Megan who would always be sitting there, right? Contributing and whatnot, but then really kind of would say, basically, you jerks. I mean, I don't say jerks, I didn't say jerks, but I put the word jerks in my head. Basically, you jerks, right? Not the part Megan said, but you, whatever. Are you gonna do anything with any of this stuff? Like, is it literally like kind of a brain arm wrestle match, or like, are you gonna go do something? Like, what are you gonna do tomorrow different because of this conversation? What are you gonna do? And that notion of that action, right?
Making it practical.
Not
if it's not going to change anything, I don't understand why we're talking about it.
How much we fall in love with that 5%, right? We could spend 6 hours multiple times a week with some of the brightest minds fighting at it, all that stuff. But like, it's like, it doesn't matter till you put it into practice and you realize, oh my God, it doesn't work, right? We see this in parenting a lot, right? We'll see that in leadership a lot. We'll see in business plans a lot. Everyone's got a great plan. until you try. And then you're like, okay, that was really cool. I really like that. It didn't work.
I like it's a little bit smaller group with 40 something people, but anyway, so Coach Mackey's talk last week at 1 o'clock last Thursday. But I don't know if any of you guys went. Ruth, you were there. So just so you know, I wasn't gonna go to all this because I know you gotta go. We gotta go. I want to go to Mackey's talk too. But what Mackey suggested for truth and sharing doubters, proving doubters wrong, that whole thing. Long and short of it, brought my 8-year-old in here the next day and had Coach Charlie, who's very close with my son Brendan, talk to him and give him truth. Because when I heard Mackey
why he's
say
being
it,
kicked out of school.
of why he's being managed out of school, academic reasons, he's not doing well. He's 8. It's like a nightmare. It's been a lifetime of, it feels like a lifetime for me, of years of just and
it felt like for me jumping out of a plane, like talking to an 8-year-old trying to give him truth. I felt like I was jumping out of a plane, and I've never skydived. So
my point on this was I heard what Mackey was saying. That's the whole mindset. I'm like, I hear this. I know this works for me. Proving doubters wrong. As much as you want to say, I don't have doubters. I don't like to think like that. I'm, BS. That is so motivating to prove doubters wrong. And once I heard it and asked my questions in Mackey's talk, I was like, I want to do this tomorrow. Brought Brendan in here the next day after school, meaning 24 hours, let's go, or you're not going to do it. And don't lie to yourself that you're going to do it. That was another good talk. I watched this TED talk. It was amazing. I read this book. I read that book. It's just such crap at some point, unless you try something within 24 hours. Because within that 24-hour window, you try it, you realize how much harder it is in practice.
yes.
In practice, as I start to think about it, what does the conversation look like? What are some of the challenges going to be? How much do we prepare for it? How much do we not? Should his brother be there? Should he not be there? How like actually putting it into application versus theory is so hard to do. And most people don't do it. And that's
I
why
swear,
nothing changes.
I felt more nervous for that talk with the 8-year-old than I have for board meetings or Wall Street Journal reporters or military force stars. I felt more nervous for the 24-hour window, even thinking about how to and then of course when it happened, it was like I was shaking.
You know
as I
what
was
Brendan's
talking.
response was? I can't believe I didn't know this. I can't believe I didn't know.
He literally had his hand on his head. How did I not know this?
Clearly, I've told him.
How did no one tell me
he
this?
knows he's moving schools. He knows it's not working out, but clearly either my message isn't resonating. I've got shame and guilt on it. I'm tiptoeing around it. I'm not really being direct. Talk about wanting to give a shit sandwich to my baby. Of course I do. I don't want to tell him the truth, but I've given him truth because he knows we might have to move. It's like life-changing. It is one of the hardest things for him to say, I can't believe I didn't know this, that they can kick a kid out for not learning. He literally cannot. He's like what? Talk about truth.
Mm-hmm.
When done the right way, has a what? And so we created Project FU to prove it's wrong.
I told him to say hello to his 2 doubters this way.
Which is a
He's
hidden.
So he just says hello to these 2 biggest doubters this way, not this way, this way. And he was so sharp when I asked him, so what are you going to say? That's like, what are you doing? It's my new hello. Just only for the 2 of them, though.
He almost died when I brought him to my office, Charlie and our office down here. I showed him the list that we have of our doubters on our wall for the last decade. And we look at it, and I don't look at it every day, no, but there's a few people on there. I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to prove these people wrong. I want to prove my believers right, but I want to prove those doubters wrong. And he looked at me like, Mom, you have them too? You and Charlie have them too? I was like, you want to do anything great on contrarian, and you have to have those doubters. So anyways, hearing Mackey talk about it, mindset, 5%. I'm like, I get it. That makes so much sense to me. I internalize it. I do that too. Next day, let's go. Let's go. Let's do this.
And what comes out, as soon as you jump in the arena, we will have a different conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will be talking in the details. We will find God and the devil at the same time as we go through the details. Until we do, we'll be arguing about syntax. We'll be arguing about word choice, right? We'll argue about having an apostrophe or an S, like capital I or not. Like it's like Jesus, right? Really in the arena, that doesn't stuff won't matter, right? So we want to get real in some of the stuff. So please try it for next week.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank you guys.
I love it.
See you next week. Give us some feedback.
Yes.
Again, Megachart, Next Jump, if you want to email us during the week as you struggle or as you have questions, reactions. We're in the arena on this. We're working on this clearly to share with you some of this.
Yes.
Conflict.
And the harder it is and the some more goes wrong, be truthful. Just share with us. I'm telling you, we are at our absolute best helping people navigate when things aren't going right. Like that's the details that we're good at not only navigating, we've seen over 10,000 different ways it goes wrong. So like we can see unique views, and if you don't like it, you're not going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter. No feelings hurt. But like we'll show you options and choices you may have never seen. So definitely email us, Megachart, Next